Okay, so there's the famous joke which says, not sure if you can see, let's go back to the Gemara on the screen. The famous joke which says, why did Adam, the first man, live to be so long?
He ate yogurt.
Answer is he didn't have a mother-in-law. So if you want to have tips for a long life, several places in Shas, you're going to see the tips how different Tanoim and Amoraim lived a long life. You have it tomorrow? But sometimes they say because he did not speak Lashon Hara, he lived to be a long life. Here they asked Reb Zakkai, could be the father of Yochanan ben Zakkai. Shalu Talmida v'Reb Zakkai. Continuation of yesterday's Gemara. If somebody went on the street and they learned Torah on the street, they davened on the street, did that place become a place of Kedusha? And Rabbi Yehuda tried saying, any place anyone ever davened has Kedusha. Now, spiritually, it's like that. We said the story of the Rebbe Marash, but an insight in the Zohar, because a Jew daven mincha in that spot. Scientifically, it's even possible to say if a person speaks words or sings a song and in front of water, and then they flash freeze it, you'll see shapes in the water. Whenever somebody says something, it has an effect on the place. However, halachically, it does not make it a status of a shul. It does not make that if you daven on the street or daven mincha on the street or you learn Torah on the street when you're waiting for the bus, if someone, it doesn't prohibit it from somebody from using that spot to, let's say, go to the bathroom in that spot. Otherwise, it will be impossible. However, the Gemara will now bring from Rabbi Zakkai that it says, although halakha it's permitted, let's say, to go a spot that somebody just finished davening, you wait about 4 seconds, the time that it takes to walk 4 amos, about 6 feet, in order that the words of davening no longer on your lips, and then technically you would be allowed to use that place for a bathroom. Reb Zakkai says, as a midas chasidus, to be extra pious, one should be more lenient, one should be more strict, stringent on themselves. Now we're learning Pirkei Avos, ethics of our fathers. It's not just somebody who wants to be somebody who does according to the letter of the law. Somebody who wants to go lifnim mishur sadin, beyond the letter of the law, as we learned yesterday in Shulchan Aruch. A chassid, the Gemara describes, is sarfan, someone who burns their nails. So shalu talmida v'es Rabbi Zakkai. Rabbi Zakkai was once asked by his disciples, "B'meh harachta yamim? In what virtue have you lived a long life?" Dovi asked Dovi today, and he says the school for a long life is to eat fatty foods every single day and sugary drinks for 100 years. That was the school for a long life. So how do you live such a long life? Amar lahem, he told them, Mi yamai lo yishtanti mayim b'toich arba amos. In my entire life, I have never shel tefillah. I have never gone to the bathroom within 4 amos, 6 feet of a location where I know that people have davened there, people have learned over there. Obviously, a place he doesn't know about, you can't help. You never know when someone stopped in the middle of the forest and davened over there. But any place that he knew of, he was strict. And like we said previously, in this case, you have made every single alleyway in the city of Nerda into a shul. And he says, yes, he was strict on that. Any place that he knew of any time that someone davened there, he lived to be a long life. He did not go to the bathroom there, and he lived to be very long in this merit. I have never called my friends with any nickname. Well, in a moment, we'll see what's wrong with nicknames. Veloy bitalti kiddush hayom, and have always made kiddush on wine. Even when he was very poor, he always made kiddush on wine. in Russia, the minute when it used to be, my grandfather used to say that wine was very expensive and not easy to find in Russia. There aren't so many grapes growing in that region. Have to be imported from Moldova, from somewhere far away. And people were very poor also. They weren't able to afford wine. And they would usually be able to afford 1 cup of wine per week. And many people would go b'yotze with that 1 cup of wine. And they would use it for Havdalah.
Oh.
Because Havdalah is a special mitzvah to have on wine. Friday night, they would make Kiddush on Challah. Shabbos day, they would make Kiddush on Mashke. And they would use a cup of wine just for Havdalah.
That's a remarkable Kiddush because the usual thing people say is not to pass over a mitzvah.
Correct.
So even though Havdalah is a big deal, but
correct.
Night,
right. There's a lot of lumnus in it. Some people say, some Chassidim will not make Kiddush on Challah because they said you can't say Hashem's name, a bracha, while holding a knife in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
But he always made sure to make Kiddush on wine, even if it was difficult for him financially. The Rebbe also would always make sure to make Kiddush on wine. Matter of fact, in Shmini Atzeres in the year 1977, the Rebbe suffered a tremendous heart attack during Hakafos, and the Rebbe didn't stop Hakafos. The Rebbe continued, although everyone left the shul. And afterwards, the Rebbe said, I have to go make Kiddush in the sukkah.
He had a heart attack,
and then the Rebbe walked to do Kiddush in the sukkah. The Rebbe was walking very weakly, and they wanted to bring, one of the doctors thought maybe it's a problem with the Rebbe's sugar. So he wanted to bring grape juice. And the Rebbe said, no, grape juice is not wine. And you make Kiddush only in wine. Imagine this after a heart attack. So what the doctor, in the middle of a heart attack, what the doctor did is the doctor took a lot of sugar and mixed it into the wine. Thinking maybe the problem might be sugar. But that's till they got better, more advanced doctors than just the ones who were right there.
Well, hopefully, actually, it was the fruit doctors during the second. How much sugar would not disqualify from having a bracha?
I'm not sure that was the. I'm not sure if they were concerned with that at that point. That was in the middle of a heart attack. So he was very careful to make Kiddush only on wine, and he even says a story. Says my old genes and my longevity genes come from my mother. My mother was very old. Pam achas. And I had no money to buy wine. And so my mother sold her tichel that she would use to go outdoors. And with that money, she bought wine for me in order to make Kiddush, knowing how important it was for me to always make Kiddush on wine. Right, Zalf and Simon, we're going to have a mnemonic for different reasons why people are blessed with long life. First one was Zion, was Zakai. Next, we're going to have Lamed, Lazar ben Shamua. Then we're going to have Pei, Rabbi Preda, and then Nun, Nechunya ben Akana. 4 different rabbis telling us why they lived a long life. The Ben Yayada, you know what that is? The Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai explains that Hashem rewards everyone mida kineged mida, measure for measure. A person goes out of the way for Hashem, Hashem will reward them in the same type of way. So in these 3 things, which Rabbi Zakai was very careful in, he was rewarded with these 3 things. First of all, he honored his mother. And his mother, you can imagine someone telling their mother, please, if your mother says, I'm going to sell my possessions for you to do a mitzvah, he would say, don't do it. But he held himself in, knowing how important it was to his mother. Of course, he honored his mother standing up. And Hashem says, if in merit of honoring your parents, you're going to live a long life. So Rabbi Zakai lived a long life. Now, Rabbi Zakai is saying how he was stringent in a mitzvah. How was I stringent in a mitzvah? My mother sold her tichel. How is that being stringent in a mitzvah? It's his mother being stringent for his mitzvah. So it comes to tell you that this idea that he was machmir, that he was stringent to go in mitzvahs, he inherited from his mother. His mother went above and beyond in order to do a mitzvah. He also did. To tell you how much he loved the mitzvah of Kiddush. If not for his mother seeing how important it was for him, she never would have sold her outdoor tichel. But since she saw how much he loved this mitzvah, And his mother realized how much anguish he would have if he would not have wine. So therefore, she sold it. And he says, I had an old mother. Why? What's important that it's old? It's my mother. Why my old mother? So people shouldn't say, he shouldn't have let his mother sell tichel. She was already old and she wouldn't go out that much. And therefore, she sold her head covering that she would use when going out on the street.
Well, it's interesting, actually, that nowadays we use the word kippah in the sense it's a yarmulke, but apparently kippah just we meant any kind of head covering because it says kippah.
Right, kippah doesn't. Right, the kippah doesn't necessarily have to mean a actual yarmulke on your head. Kippah nowadays people take it to mean dome. Right, kippah dome, but the kippah actually is more like an arch. It says the Beis Hamikdash was built on the Temple Mount, and the entire area under it was hollowed out, and was built kippin and gabe kippin, arches on top of arches, in order to stop any tumah. It was underground from rising. The arches would stop it. So kippin, in you could say in Lashon Kodesh, in the Holy Tongue, means more of an arch. So that fits more with a covering on the head. Now, although the Rashba explains that although Reb Zakkai was allowed to make kiddush on challah, but still he was very strict to even spend a lot of money and to make sure to make kiddush on wine. It's his own personal chumrah. Now, he could have heard kiddush from someone else who makes kiddush on wine. Why did he have to make kiddush himself on wine? And he was willing to pawn his own possessions, because obviously, if his mother was selling her possessions, means he has nothing left of his own. He's willing to sell his own possessions in order to make his own kiddush on wine, because it's a mitzvah to make your own kiddush on Shabbos. Because mitzvah whenever you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, even if you can send a messenger, it's always better to do it himself. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came to take the Aron, the coffin of Yosef out of Egypt, he could have sent someone else to do it, but he went ahead and he did it himself. Halachically, you don't have to sell your possessions to make kiddush on wine, especially Shabbos day. For light, exactly. For licht, for candles, you do, because that's shalom bayis. But for making kiddush on wine, you don't have to sell your possessions. Very important, the person is not allowed to give any nicknames to their friend, even if it's a nickname that everybody says and everybody is used to this nickname. You should not give nicknames to anyone else. Definitely a negative nickname. If it's something that everyone says and everyone calls them that way, for example, Rebbe Tzvi Masmid, it's a nickname, and that's an accepted way of saying it, and you're not doing it in order to chas v'shalom, saying something negative, only something positive, that you're allowed to do. Amidas Chassidus is never to call anybody in any type of nickname at all.
Well, in the past, actually, people were more to giving nicknames. A lot of people did not have last names.
Let me just bring up the Gemara here on the screen. This is Mesechta Baba Basra, of two different Gemaras. Discuss idea of how stringent and how strict it is. One should not give a nickname. Tani Kama Kam de Nachman Yitzchak, Gemara relates, it was a Tana who recited Mishnayos in front of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, and he says, I'll do just the English, whoever insults their friend is considered as if they are, humiliates them in public, it's as if they have spilled blood. And Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, very good, because when you insult someone in public, their face becomes red, and then their blood drains, it becomes white. It's like spilling blood. And he says, in Eretz Yisrael, what mitzvah are people particularly diligent in? And he told them, they're very careful that they don't insult others. Because Rebbe Chanina says, there are everyone descends to Gehenna except for three. He means descends to Gehenna. He says no. What he means is there are three people which don't leave Gehenim. Who are the 3 people which don't leave Gehenim? Habal Eishes Ish, somebody who has relations with a married woman, and this is going against both Hashem and people. It says they don't leave Gehenim. Hamalbim Pnei Chaver B'Rabim, one who humiliates another in public. Third one is V'Machane Shemra L'Chaveroi, someone who calls another with a derogatory name. The Gemara asks, seemingly that's insulting him. So the Gemara says, even if the person is not insulted, even if a person is given a nickname and he already sort of accepted it, it's called Moshe the Schnorrer, and everybody calls him Moshe the Schnorrer, and he's not insulted when he says this anymore, even this type of name is forbidden to do. And it says someone who never leaves Gehenim based on that. Let's look at the next Gemara. Mesechta Shabbos. That's a picture from yesterday. Someone learning on the street. The Gemara here, Mesechta Shabbos, also talks about how not to call anyone by any nicknames.
The father used to call everybody in the family by a nickname.
Yeah.
He called the Kakarevich.
The Kakarevich.
My father, he called the Ticheritzi. And my sister, he called the Vance.
The what?
The Vance.
The Vance. Vance is like a mustache, right? A what? A bed bug. I met
He meant it. That's how he showed his affection. Not negative.
I met somebody in Montreal on the subway in during Hanukkah by night. Asked him if he's Jewish. He says, "Nope, I am Palestinian." So, but my mother is Jewish. I said, "Oh, you're Jewish too." He says, "I'm from Samaria." His mother is Jewish. His father was an Arab. Unfortunately, his mother married an Arab. And he said, he says, "I have a Jewish name." He said, "What's your name?" He says, "My Jewish name is Yasser Lagoylam."
Oh.
Yasser Lagoylam was a mute. Yeah, a guy I met. And he was very helpful to me. I had to get somewhere in the subway. He went with me extra few stops to show me. He's excited to talk about his mother. And he says whenever his mother would get upset at him, she would call him Yasser Lagoylam. And he says, when I left him, I gave him a menorah and to light it, but he told me, he says, my name was whatever it was, my Jewish name, Yasser Lagoylam.
Oh, no.
Listen, this is a Shinta Begalusa, the Shechina and Galus.
Rabbi, I have a quick question. Like the name Yitz for Yitzhak, is that bad?
I don't think that's considered to be like a nickname, right? That's sort of like saying, my father grew up in a class of 18 boys. They were all born 3 or 4 years after the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Out of 18 boys, 16 were named, 15 were Yosef Yitzchak, or 14 were Yosef Yitzchak, and other 2 were either Yitzchak or Yosef, one or the other. So, and they called everyone by their last names. So it would be Itkin, or this one, and there were 2 boys whose last name was Garari, so they used to get mixed up. And every boy had their own nickname. Be Yosef, Yitzchak, Yitzi, Itzi, Fitzi, Fitcha. Everyone had their own nickname. Each there 16 different iterations of Yosef or Yitzchak that everyone had their name.
How literally are we supposed to take it? Actually, that's like what is it? As far as actually, let me say about it.
Is that how your father got his nickname?
Fitcha. All of his friends called him Fitcha.
How literally are we supposed to take it? Actually, these people never coming up, or is it actually that actually the majority of them don't come up? Actually, but maybe you have some exceptions who do incredible tshuva. Actually, that they still get brought up.
When it comes to Gehanim, Kol Yisrael Yesh Lehem Chelek Lehem Haba. Every single Jew has a portion in the world to come. So what exactly, So then we see Malva Berib is someone who lends with interest, doesn't get up. We have, the Rebbe has a long writing about this. He wrote before he became Rebbe, a very long letter about Tchias HaMesim, long entry. Explains like how you, there's different stages. Every Jew will eventually wake up for the resurrection of the dead, except those who don't believe in it. And those who don't believe in it, not because they're not because of the Tinkas Nishba, because they never knew better, but because they went against it. And everyone else, he says, at different levels or stages of Tchias and Mesim or of revelation, etc. The Rebbe Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, I'm sure related to you, explains on this Gemara that the Gemara Mesechta Kiddushin says, Parnasa is lav b'schus Talia Milsa, ela b'mazel Talia Milsa. That it doesn't depend on how good you act, but rather it depends on your mazel from heaven. Because there's no reward, there's no rewards for mitzvahs in this world. The reward for the mitzvahs are in the world to come. He says that only applies for mitzvahs that one is obligated to do. But if one goes then beyond the letter of the law, then he will be rewarded to go and receive a reward even in this world. Because if he's going beyond his obligation, so to speak, Hashem will go beyond his obligation and give him a reward, not just in this world, also in the world to come. And now we see in the Gemara what happened at the Chasana. Over here on this page, there was somewhere else which discussed about the nickname, but it's, I guess, not important for now. But the same idea that how stringent it is to have a nickname. Continues the Gemara. Hope you can see on the screen. Tana, we learned in a brisa concerning Reb Zakkai that although he was very poor during his lifetime, but when he passed away, he became very rich. Kishemesa, when he passed away, when his mother passed away, he nichaloi shloish meyes garbi yayin. His mother left for him 300 barrels of wine, meaning that they didn't just appear. He didn't win the lottery for the wine. She became very wealthy. His mother was very old, and she sold even her tichel that she goes out with on the street that has sunk to buy wine. Hashem paid them back, and when she passed away, she left 300 barrels of wine for her son as a reward. And not just that, Kishemes when Reb Zakkai passed away, he left for his children 3,000 garbe yayin, 3,000 barrels of wine.
Apparently the wine got buried.
50 gallons?
I don't know how big each barrel was back then. But whatever, let's say it was 50 gallons, 20 gallons. But at any rate, that's a lot of wine.
But apparently, actually, the barrels of wine got married and had lots of children.
Correct. Are you allowed to, if you want to learn Torah in peace? Reb Zakkai, of course, was sitting and learning Torah. And he was receiving, you could say, he wasn't working to earn a living. Rather, he was receiving a gift from his mother. Is it okay to receive gifts from your mother? From here, we see seemingly that it's okay, but we'll go into a little bit more in the next sugya, in the next topic. We'll do one more story. It's 11:35. We'll do one more story over here. Rav Huna. We have a story over here about Rav Huna. Hava asar risa b'koi kamei derav. Rav Huna wanted to learn Torah, and he wanted to do the mitzvah of Kiddush, and like we put on a gartel before the mitzvah of Kiddush. Then they used to wear just one robe. So he wanted to do the mitzvah of Kiddush, so he put on his gartel. He wasn't able to go to the Judaica store and buy a fancy silk gartel, but rather he was very poor, and so he put on a gartel that was made out of straw, out of grass. So he took a certain type of stretchy type of grass, a belt, and he put it on, and then he stood up to make Kiddush in front of Rav. So Rav Huna have a aser risa v'koi kamei de Rav. Rav Huna, I'm going to another story how Hashem, you could say, pays back those who do mitzvahs with difficulty. Hashem will compensate them many, many times over. So he put on his grass belt in order to make Kiddush. Amar Lei, Rav told him, my high, why are you getting dressed in such a way? Now, why is your belt made out of grass? What happened to your belt? Not made out of leather or something else? Amar Lei, so Rav Huna answered back, Lo have li Kiddusha. I did not have any wine for Kiddush. I couldn't afford it. So I sold, or I pawned my belt, however much money I could get from that. And with that money, I was able to buy wine in order to make Kiddush for the Kiddush daytime. And once again, daytime Kiddush is not an obligation on wine as much as a nighttime Kiddush. And if you can't afford it, you can make Kiddush on Challah or Chamar Medina. Amar Lei told him, Yeherava the titum b'shiroi. He gave him a bracha. Maybe Hashem's will that you be surrounded by silk. The word titum is like you have by Yitzchak. He dug wells, and the Plishtim, the Philistines, sitbom. They stuffed them up. So the word titum is may you be totally surrounded, covered up by silk garments. Now, this is back probably in the times of the Silk Road, right? Silk was very expensive. It was only for the rich and the nobles and the royalty. And so he gave him a bracha, may you be surrounded by silk garments. In the merit that you sold your belt and wearing a grass belt in order to make Kiddush. And Ki Kollel, Rabbi Brei. So later on, Rabbi Bar Huna, Rabbi the son of Rav Huna, got married. And at this point, the bracha, the blessing of Rav, was fulfilled. Rav Huna inish gutzahava. Now, Rav Huna was a very short person. Why does Gemara have to mention that Rav Huna was short? Is it something to is it something negative? As a matter of fact, we see in other Gemaras that there's a woman who said about Shmuel, I know that he's a short person. And Shmuel had her put in Cherem. But he says it's going to explain something that we'll see very soon. So Rav Huna was very short. Have a gana aporya. And during the wedding, I guess he was waiting for the guests to come, was after the chuppah, and Rav Huna went to rest. V'asen b'nasei, v'kalasei, and then his daughters and his daughter-in-laws came into the house. Since he was so short, they didn't notice he was laying on the bed. The kalan, the shalchan v'shadyin menayu alayu, and they were already a wealthy family at this point. They all took off their silk garments, and they put all their silk garments and started piling up on top of him. I remember as a child we saw a comic with this story. So they took off their silk coats that they wore outside, and they started piling on top of Rav Huna without realizing he was over there. And he woke up and he realized that he's completely covered with silk. So the bracha of Rav was fulfilled with Rav Huna, that he eventually, because as a reward, because he sold his belt to get wine, to sell it, to get wine, to buy wine for Kiddush of the day, Hashem paid him back that he now was completely covered by silk, because his family was so wealthy that they had silk. Everyone, him, his daughters, and his daughter-in-laws were all able to afford silk garments. Shomer Rav heard that his bracha, that his blessing to Rav Huna was fulfilled. V'ikbid v'yamar, and he became angry at Rav Huna, and he said, "My time lo yamartali ki berachticha v'chein lamar." When I blessed you, when I benched you, you should have told me back v'chein lamar. You know v'chein lamar. Yeah. And may the master have the same thing, that I should be blessed with this blessing as well. And I was giving a blessing to you, and you should have said back to me, may you be blessed as well, and I could have answered amen. So avarcham varachecha, the kohanim bless us, and Hashem in turn blesses them back. There was one time that somebody was in Yechidus by the Rebbe, and at the end of the Yechidus, certain rabbi, Rosh Hashiva, and the Rebbe gave him a bracha at the end. He answered, Amen v'chein lamar. Amen. And so too to you. That's what the Gemara says. When someone blesses you, you say v'chein lamar, and may you have the same thing. The Rebbe answered back immediately, v'chein lamasuk, and so too for the sweet. Mar means a master. Mar also means bitter. And you're finishing off a conversation saying, and so too for the. It could sound like so too for the bitter one. So the Rebbe immediately added on v'chein lamasuk, so too for the sweet. So that's why I've seen in other circles where they say v'chein lamar, but haven't really seen it so much in Chabad. Rashi says perhaps this time was a Eis Ratzin, was a auspicious time in heaven, and when you bless someone, your blessing becomes fulfilled. That's why you should always give a bracha to another Jew, because you never know. It might be an Eis Ratzin, it might be an auspicious time. Now, Rav Huna was covered by silk garments, but the blessing of Rav was fulfilled that he became very wealthy. Now, although Rav Huna, he was surrounded by silk, he didn't actually own the silk, right? It was owned by his family. That
not only that, it was Beged Isha.
It was true, right? It was Beged Isha, I guess, but he wasn't. So that's a good thing. It wasn't a good point. I guess it wasn't on purpose. He was surrounded by silk. But the Gemara Mesechta Brachas says that Rav says, "I was always poor my entire life," and he was sort of upset about the fact that he was poor. And Rav would only eat meat once a week on Shabbos, and Rav was upset. Rav was. We see sometimes in the Gemara, Rav would have a kapeda. He would become upset at certain things. So Rav saw the advantages that someone like him could have by serving Hashem with wealth, and therefore he says if it was a time of a bracha of heaven, you should have answered back v'chein lamar. Rav wasn't upset that Rav Huna became wealthy. He was very happy for him. Let's see the brachas. Just bring it up on the screen here. 84a. Rav wasn't upset. And also, how could Rav have known that it was a Eis Ratzin? It was a auspicious time. But a bracha of somebody, of every Jew, especially a bracha of a Gadol B'Torah, someone who's as great as Rav, it makes a impression in this world and in the next world as well. And therefore, Rav Huna should have realized right away that any bracha which comes right away should be, he should have realized that by himself. Rav Huna, it says he was short. Why does Gemara have to say he was short? Yaakov Emden, familiar with Yaakov Emden, Yaibitz, he writes that when it says Rav Huna was short, it wasn't just to say why nobody noticed him laying on the bed. Also, Rav Huna held himself as a short person. Who am I? I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. I'm not someone. Who am I to give a bracha to Rav? To give a bracha to someone as great as Rav? And therefore, Rav Huna didn't feel he is in the position to answer to Rav v'chein lamar. May you have the blessing as well. And therefore, he thought better for me just to be quiet. What happens if I give a blessing and it doesn't get fulfilled? And better, he says, maybe better that Rav should give a blessing unconditionally, not expecting to receive anything in return. However, when the blessing became fulfilled, like it says, "Vavarcha mevarachecha," I will bless those who bless you. Rav became upset that Rav Huna should have said the same thing. The bracha would have come to him in the same type of way as well. Therefore, whenever you have an opportunity to give a bracha, you should always say it. There was one time, Rebbe Avram Paris. He was by the Frierdiker. He was a very fiery chassid. he had to run away from Russia. Many other good chassidim came to Eretz Yisrael. He bought an orchard. He found one time a treasure in the orchard that was under a tree of old Ottoman gold coins. He sent the entire thing to the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was just left Russia. I think with that money, the Rebbe's chasana took place. And he one time had to leave Eretz Yisrael. He took all of his money. He heard the Frierdiker Rebbe needed money. I think he sold his fields, or he took a mortgage. He couldn't pay it back. And he came, and he was in New York by the Frierdiker Rebbe for several years, until eventually went back to Eretz Yisrael. I think he sorted everything out. Now, one time while he's there, his family is all living in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, and he would start helping. Helped by the Rebbe. The Rebbe was, the Rebbe's was doing his work in Kahas publishing and different things he was doing for the Frierdiker Rebbe at that time. Matter of fact, when the Rebbe, after the Frierdiker Rebbe's stock was passing, Chassidim said, who should become the next Rebbe? Which son-in-law? Older son-in-law, Rashaga, the younger one. And they said, the older one, we know him. We don't really think that he's, to be able to be a Rebbe. But the younger son-in-law, the Rebbe, they didn't know. Rebbe was a very private person. All we know about him is that he worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Could he be a Rebbe? And so Ram Padre says, I know him very well. I worked with him in the same room for several years. He hides from everybody like a ganav, like he conceals himself. And he was a very fiery chassid. One time he was by the Frierdiker Rebbe. And when he came down from the Frierdiker Rebbe, all the Bachrim, the yeshiva students, would never see the Frierdiker Rebbe, asked him. They saw he was a tremendous excitement. They asked him what happened. So he said, his rakshas, he said there was a certain person who asked a bracha from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe, whatever the story was, he said something, and it only came to fruition what the Frierdiker Rebbe said. They saw, in retrospect, what the Frierdiker Rebbe said was true a long time later. So he came so excited to the Frierdiker Rebbe and told him, Rebbe, Ayer Vart, Vart Nishfar Lerin. The word that you says never goes to waste. It's never lost. And Frierdiker Rebbe answered him, Maina Vart Vart Nishfar Lerin. And then he pointed, Nishlamaila, Nishlamata. My words never go to waste, not above in heaven, and not lamata in this world down here. And Frierdiker Rebbe says that when a word from a tzaddik comes out, it changes, it's able to make everything in the world different, to change. There's a famous story, an anecdote about the year of Shavuos, Tashon Chav Gimel, Shavuos 1963. The Shavuos Verbringen, in those years, the Verbringens of the Rebbe will go on very long. And Shavuos, I don't know if that daylight savings time yet, but the Shavuos Verbringen of the Rebbe went on for many, many hours. And it went on all the way till about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the Rebbe said a sicha, there was a maimer, a sicha at that point. And then, at the end of that sicha, the Rebbe mentioned how Hashem should help all the Jews who are stuck in Russia and Soviet Russia behind the Iron Curtain. May Hashem redeem them. And this is after Shavuos. Everyone's up the first night. There was a maimer in the first night, the middle of the night, and they would repeat the maimer. Everyone in Talucha to other shoals. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, Matzah Shavuos. People were a little tired. And everyone answered Amen, but a verschlafene Amen, a sleepy Amen. And after that, if you look at the Sikha it says afterwards, they sang there was Nigan Shia Samecha. But a big part of the Verbringen is missing. At that point, the Rebbe suddenly became very emotional. The Rebbe started crying, and the Rebbe said, right now was an Eis Ratz in Lamaila. Right now was an auspicious time in heaven. And if everybody would have answered Amen with a chayas, with a excitement, there would have been a Yeshua, salvation for all the Jews in Russia. And then the Rebbe started speaking very morosely. He says, how could it be? Nobody realized that now is a special time. And then the Rebbe says, already 13 years, I'm saying my Marim and trying to teach Chassidus, and nobody's understanding, nobody's getting anything. What am I doing here? Why did I connect myself to you? And the Rebbe started crying. You could have saved all the Jews of Russia right now. And it was a very, very painful sikha at 3 a.m. I'm sure everyone woke up with a jolt back then. At the end of that sikha, everyone answered Amen with a chayas. And then everyone's saying Yeshia Samecha. It took many more decades, but 3.5 more decades for Russia to come up, for the Soviet Union to come apart. Of course, the words of the Rebbe never go to waste, because at that time, exactly at that moment of that Fabrengen, as a matter of fact, exactly during that Sicha, that the Rebbe was speaking, there was in Shavuos, or Matzah Shavuos, Tafshin Chaf Gimel, 1963, there was a baby being born in Italy at that time. His name is Doivber, Shalom Doivber Pinchas. Last name is Lazar, Ber Lazar, who's now the chief rabbi of Russia, and of course, as a shliach of the Rebbe, does tremendous, tremendous things for Yiddishkeit in Russia, with all the difficulties, especially with everything unpredictable in Russia as it is, especially nowadays. And still, the Rebbe perhaps was bringing down his neshama at that time. We don't know exactly. But when there's an Eis Ratzon, you have to capitalize on it. From that point on, by the Rebbe's Fabrengens, whenever the Rebbe mentioned the Russian Jews, there was a chassid named Rebbe Gansberg who would stand in the back and always say, L'chaim v'adirusa shayidin, L'chaim for the Russian Jews. And everyone would always answer Amen, or L'chaim back, L'chaim b'bracha back to him. But you never know when it's an Eis Ratzon. There's always a good time to bench, to give a bracha to another Jew and to help another Jew, because you never know when this bracha could take place. Saying v'chein lamar, a person should never think they're too small to give a bracha to someone else. Should never think they're too insignificant to give a bracha to someone else. We see from our Gemara that whenever you have a bracha, whenever you feel like giving a bracha to someone, you should definitely do it. And even if you're not going to have any benefit from it, it's still toiv ayin. It's good to give a bracha. And it says in many different Eis Ratzons, auspicious times, when family gathers together, it says it's an Eis Ratzon. At a time of a simcha, a bal simcha, someone is making a simcha, it's called the owner of simcha. You're able to break boundaries and give brachas to others. That's why when you go to a bal simcha and tell a mazel tov, it's customary that they should always give a bracha. There's a letter from the Alter Rebbe, which brings what it says, that alti birchas hadyat kal beinecha. A bracha of a simple person should always be very precious in your eyes. First of all, you never know. That person might be a hidden tzaddik. By Dovi, I know he's not even a hidden tzaddik. But it says, you never know. That person might be a big tzaddik giving you a bracha. He might give it to you wholeheartedly. To be a special bracha. There's a story of the Ragat Shavar Gaon, that there was someone who came over to the Ragat Shavar Gaon. We went through him. We've spoken about him. He passed away in the 1930s. He was a tremendous, tremendous genius, the one with long hair. So someone came over to the Ragat Shavar Gaon. By him, Shas was not just backwards and forwards, he knew inside out. And he would have very little patience, even for the greatest Talmidei Chacham, for the greatest Torah scholars. Someone one time brought him a sefer that he published and wrote. And he saw it, says, wow, I never knew this. He says, and the guy's feeling good. Wow, you never knew the things I wrote in my book, my sefer? He says, no, I never knew there was a printing press in the city of Love. So someone came over to him to ask for a bracha, give me a bracha, a blessing, and said that he wanted to show how he knows how to learn. He says, Alte birchas hadyat kal beinecha. Says a blessing of a simple person should not be something small, should be very precious. So for sure, someone as great as a Ragat Shavar could bless me. So the Ragat Shavar says, why do you have to make a kal v'chomer sefer, to make an inference I could bless you? Without the kal v'chomer, you give me a bracha. It says, without a kal v'chomer, you should give me a blessing. It says a simple person's blessing should be important. David HaMelech, when he bought the place where the Beis HaMikdash is, he brought it from a Rav Nayavusi, a non-Jew, but that's a Rav Nayavusi gave him a blessing, and this blessing was fulfilled, and the plague, which was every day 100 Jews were dying, stopped. So even someone who's non-Jewish was able to give a bracha, and you see the bracha was very special. Daryavesh, non-Jewish king, gave a blessing, and it became fulfilled. So even someone like these people, right, could give a bracha, So therefore, you can understand more why the bracha should have been given. Now, although a person can say, who am I to give a bracha to the Rebbe? Someone as great as Rav, Rebbe of his time, and I'm Ravuna, I should give a bracha to the Rebbe. Well, we see every single year on the Rebbe's wedding anniversary, in the name of all Chassidim, there'd be one representative to go up and give a bracha. From Moshe Feinstein would write, I'm not a Rebbe, I'm a Rosh Yeshiva, right? He's a Rosh Yeshiva, he would make shiurim. He's a posek, writing halacha. I'm not a tzaddik that gives brachas, but anyone who ever asks me a bracha, always gives him a bracha right away. He says, although in past generations, you could say, I'm learning this in Kollel Daf, you have what's called a nasikh and a nasi. Two different people. A roya, a shepherd who takes care of the people, and then a nasikh, sort of like a rebbe, one who a tzaddik who davens and people get it. He doesn't, like the sun, he doesn't try affecting the world. The world is affected just by watching him, right? Takafas, you don't try affecting the person. The kedusha affects you, and then there's a raya who gives to every person individually. So it always used to be Rosh Yeshiva was someone who was like a parish, separate from the world, and you go to a tzaddik, a guy, someone who knows how to learn. But nowadays it's become that even people go to Rosh Yeshiva's people in order to receive a bracha. He says, because you never know. He says, again, I'm not a tzaddik. He's not from the tzaddikim, Talmidei Baal Shem. However, he says, whoever asks a bracha from their friend, even if they're a simple person, should always receive give them a bracha. And believe in Hashem, that Hashem could give a bracha to anybody.
There's also a big issue that if someone actually gets, it's a bracha actually from Rebbe, right?
Yeah.
But you yourself also have actually some merit too. So actually, your merit can combine with the Rebbe's merit to have the bracha be fulfilled.
Right. I remember taking my grandfather. He looked like I brought pictures of him. He had a very big tzir hadras panim. I was taking him to 770 to daven. He was older. He was already 94, 95.
It's your grandfather, right?
Grandfather's father. And people will have some nice pictures of me and him. One day I'll put it up. So people will come over to him in shul and ask him for a bracha, for a blessing. Remember what he would say? He would say that, he says, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the Ruach HaKodesh, prophecy was taken away, and it said it was given to Cheder, Shoit, V'Katan, someone who can hear, a children, and a Shoita, someone who's a foolish. It says the more of a child you are, the more you can hear, and the more of a Shoita, of a fool you are, the more Ruach HaKodesh you have. So not a child, he's 90-something. He says, I could hear still, so you got me the Shoita. But there was a time on Simchas Torah. The Rebbe says it's a very special time. Everyone should give brachas to each other, blessings to each other as much as they can. And after the Rebbe's bringing before a kafas, everyone was outside giving, pouring brachas, blessings onto everyone else. So we do see from here that a bracha, a blessing, is a very special thing. And especially if one is given the power to be a shliach of the Rebbe, you definitely have the power to give brachas. So we should all give brachas to each other. First of all, every yid should be happy, healthy, wealthy. All the hostages should come back. Shaftin levetach v'artzachem, as it says in this week's parsha. We should live with security in our land, and any other bracha needs gezund, parnasa, nachas, shiduchim. Hashem knows how to give in the best way. Okay.
Wasn't Daryavish? Oh, too late.
Hey, what?
Daryavish was Esther's son.
Right. I think we went.